is the Hard Parking Podcast, brought to you by Wright Honda out of Scottsdale, Arizona. And guess what? I'm your host, Jay Finning. Coming up on today's show, we talk to Jawn and Naya over in Japan. Talk about the differences in his life over the past year and a half, where he decided to move from California to Japan. So if you're new to the show, this episode is what I call an end-to-end episode with an interview. So you don't have a builder's corner, you don't have a user ride of the week, you don't have any of that stuff. You basically just have my opening, the interview, and at the end, I'm going to slide in some Q&A where I answer your questions. Before you go any further, make sure you're subscribed to the podcast, and welcome to this show, the non-automotive automotive podcast. After this brief message from one of our sponsors, we're going to get right to it. Are you tired of your dog losing its cool in a thunderstorm or fireworks? You might want to look at tongue treats. TongueTreats.com. High anxiety relief, pain relief, inflammation relief. It's a direct connection between the tongue and the brain. Doesn't waste time going down to the stomach, where it gets broken down, enters the bloodstream, then to the brain eventually. By then, little Izzy, my dog, has been hiding under the house for like 20 minutes. The Tongue Treat CBD strips provide rapid results for your pet with the right amount of CBD, which is not psychoactive. It's important to test and verify your pet is getting the proper dosage. A single strip should be enough. Have doubts? There's certified analysis from a lab available on the website. Think about it. Efficacy and economy. Tongue Treats. I gotta get your Tongue Treats. Seriously, they work. The CBD strips for dogs work. Before we get to Jawn and Naya, I want to tell you guys about the 2021 Honda Ridgeline Black Edition. So a couple weeks ago, I went out with Joe Tanalia and Wright Honda, show sponsor, and we drove the Black Edition Ridgeline around. So if you haven't seen the video, check it out on the Hard Parking Podcast YouTube page. You can also find it on Hard Parking Media. The car was pretty good. I didn't know if it was going to, like I asked, is this a truck? Is it an SUV? Is it some sort of like a truck crossover? And I guess technically it's considered a truck. If I was in the market for one, I might consider it because it would do everything that I actually need to do, which I don't really do a lot besides run to Home Depot. But I thought that the speakers, it's got speakers built into the truck bed, which is really cool. We called it party mode in the video. So if you haven't seen the video, check it out. Hard Parking Podcast on YouTube or Hard Parking Media. They both get you to me. But now it's time for the social media highlight of the week. Brought to you by RideSold.com, a new online vehicle auction site built by car enthusiasts for car enthusiasts with a goal to promote and sell modern day classics. Head over to RideSold.com to buy your next car, sell your current car, or just to spectate. New auctions are coming soon to Ride Sold. I want to welcome to the show good friend of mine, Jawn and Naya. Jawn is joining us from Japan. Jawn, what's up, man?
Hi, man. Just enjoying some, actually, the sakura are blooming. Or ending blooming, so I enjoyed a lot of good sights and
the what?
And cherry blossoms, sakura.
Soccer. I thought you said soccer. I'm like, is soccer? Are they playing soccer over there right now?
They do play soccer here, but they do a lot of the rugby's really big right now. But yeah, so the cherry blossoms bloomed here. This was last week, and they're just starting to all fall off. Almost all gone, but you can still catch a good few of them. So
those are beautiful.
It's a nice time. Oh, man,
like we have those in the States, but only in DC, I think, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think LA has some, like around Little Tokyo, or
sure.
I think I've seen them in Cali, but I couldn't. I haven't been to the States in 2 years, so it's
how do you say it? Sakura?
Sakura.
Sakura.
So Sakura would be the Romanji way.
Sakura.
You're putting a nice flair on that one, baby.
Sakura. Sakura.
Now you're putting a sexual spin on it, and I'm into it.
All right, we don't need to go there. So what's good? How's Japan, man, treating you? And you said you've been there for like you haven't seen the States in 2 years.
Yeah, almost. It's coming up on 2 years. I have to say, I love it here. It's amazing. That said, there are some definite things I wish I knew coming in.
Like what?
Japan is very foreigner friendly if you're like a tourist. It's super easy to get around and do everything you want to do as a tourist. Living here is a very different
like a foreign national. Is that what you're technically considered, or no? Is that the term? Foreign national?
I'm not sure what my term would be at the moment because I'm a spouse of a Japanese national. So okay. I think I've only really considered myself an immigrant kind of, but basically a green card holder. It makes for interesting comparisons. And that's really what it's been, is it's been a very wild comparison, because I know fairly well, and I've been through the process in the States. You know, I lived in the States my whole life. And then, you know, I've seen a lot of people get married to international couples and see the process they have to go through. And then now I'm going through the process, and it's just so different from what America is in general. Like, I feel like America is so friendly to immigrants. You know, getting jobs is very easy, getting your license is very easy, all those things. And here it's very much, if you haven't assimilated, you have to assimilate, really. I mean, the language, the licensed language is really, the written one is offered in only 2 languages. Thankfully, one is Japanese and the other one is English. But the practical test is only Japanese, and it's quite daunting.
Do strangers like you? Because we're kind of weird over here, right? But I think in America, you're more likely to say smile or say hi to a stranger in passing than you are to kind of look at them with disgust.
Yeah, in America, I feel like I knew all my neighbors for the whole block. Like, I'm kind of an oddball in that sense. I lived in Southern California, which already kind of has like that snobbish vibe. But here in Japan, it's everyone kind of keeps to themselves for the most part. That said, I've still kind of gotten to know my neighbors, and maybe not necessarily the ones in my apartment complex, but in my area. And a lot of that mostly has to do with the fact that I brought my dog. So I'm out every morning, you know, and you see the same people, you know, they're walking their dogs, or, you know, they're going to work or whatever they're doing. You see them the same time. So I always just try to say hello. And for me, it's an opportunity to practice interacting with Japanese people, and to practice, you know, my Japanese listening and speaking.
For the listeners, I consider you kind of an outgoing guy too.
Yeah, most people, I think, would say I'm abrasively outgoing.
Does that work over there?
I have had to tame it down quite a bit. And you do have to pick your spots, but you can be outgoing. And I think a lot of Japanese people are happy to have conversations and meet with foreigners, but they will probably never initiate it.
Yeah.
Or rarely, especially sober. Like, the only times I've really been approached by Japanese people to, like, just kind of out of the blue has been, you know, off the train, late at night. You know, they're coming home from karaoke or whatever. They're drunk and they're like, "Oh, you want to go? Let's go get drinks or whatever." And it's like, all right. They want to practice their English, and I kind of just want to get drunk. So
what's the drink of choice over there? Like, what do you drink a lot of? What, do you drink something more than you thought you would, or not as much? Or
no, my drinking is relatively the same. The one thing that I really can't drink here that I would drink a lot more of in the States is tequila. And that's just because access here is difficult. You know, now I prefer the higher quality stuff, you know, as it happens. You know, you just enjoy the drink more. You know, I can't drink Cuervo. Like, right. I can, but it's awful, you know, and so I do that. And then, so right now I drink a lot of beer or sake occasionally. When the weather heats up, I've always been a fan of gin. So I stick with the known and true. I've been trying to get into whiskeys, but it's just not my drink.
Have you drank Roku? Since they're from over there, Roku Gin by Suntory?
I have not. No,
that's
I don't
delicious.
think I have, at least. I will have to try it.
I love it. I drink a whole. I drink it just like I'm sitting here drinking this glass of vodka.
I'll have to try it because I love gin, especially when the weather's hot. Gin, just squeeze a little bit of lime juice in there. Gin and tonic is like one of my favorite hot weather drinks.
I can't do tonic. I have to do club soda. So you mentioned earlier, really nice to tourists, but if you live there, things are different. And in a previous conversation, you had mentioned that maybe there are some certain weird restrictions. Like, what are some restrictions? Because a lot of the listeners probably have never been there. And if they've been there, they've only been there in a tourist capacity.
So like, a lot of restrictions on like opening a business here. Like I had a business in the States and I still do. But like opening a business in Japan is much more difficult for a foreigner. Like you have to have somebody of Japanese nationality on the payroll or a partial owner. So that's one thing that it's kind of interesting. They don't just let you do whatever, at least for legal reasons. I don't know why, but there's other things like restrictions. I'm trying to think.
What about on like a more personal or just daily level?
Like daily level,
everything's the same,
notice, for the most part, things are the same. You'll notice that some people, especially like in the train, you'll occasionally get that gaijin vibe, the foreigner vibe, where people just aren't comfortable around you. Like everyone will be jammed up against each other in the train. And if you're lucky enough to get a seat, some people will move, or, sometimes even they'll just basically they'll be jammed up against each other, hip to hip, but you somehow have this extra little buffer zone of freedom. And it's really, in the beginning for me, it took a while to notice, and sometimes it's a little uncomfortable just because it's like, it's okay, dude, but they just don't feel it. So it's whatever,
Did you remember to put deodorant on that day, John?
Funny enough, deodorant is not a thing here. People don't wear it. So the only people who wear deodorants and colognes are actually foreigners,
Westerners.
So yeah, there's quite a lot of foreigners here now. Funny enough, a lot from India. My wife was very surprised when she moved back a couple of years before I did. And there's a lot more foreigners than when she left.
You ever do that number where it's like, hey, look, there's another American, and then you get close enough and hear them talking, and they're talking like Swedish or German or something?
I actually helped a lady on the train, and she looked, white, blue eyes, white hair, blonde hair, and she was clearly looking for help, and she was trying to communicate with this Japanese lady. And I ended up kind of coming in and just being like, can I help you? And she was from Sweden. And I just kind of was a surprise, but it wasn't like, oh, but there's a lot of, especially, so that happens occasionally, but also, like, there's a lot of people who come to Japan for various reasons, but I ended up meeting a lot of them through my English teaching job. Like I've met people from UK and Sweden and the Netherlands and oh my gosh, Norway. Made good friends there. So it's just interesting the amount of people and their own reasons why they're here.
So you mentioned your English teaching job, and I think we've talked about that before, but for the listeners is just now being introduced to Mr. Jawn and Naya. What do you do with teaching? How often do you teach? What do you do when you're not teaching? And then we'll talk about cars, because this is a non-automotive podcast. And last time I checked, you have an NSX that's trapped over here in the States. So teaching first.
It is. Yeah, it is there. So I teach. That was the first job I got, was an English teacher, which is kind of the easiest thing to get while you're here as a foreigner. And that's another one of the really big restrictions in everyday life trying to live here is that the opportunities are very limited. But I teach English once a week on Saturdays. And really the reason I do that is the pay is much better. And it gives me a lot more freedom to still try to find a normal, not teaching job. Because a lot of they're called akaiwas, they will treat you very poorly as a foreigner. They'll sponsor you. A lot of them will even fly you out.
Okay, so hold on. So what's an akaiwa?
An akaiwa is an English school. So really all they do is they teach their Japanese students English. It's like I'm trying to think.
How do you spell that?
There's
a reason I'm asking all these akaiwa questions.
Let me double check. I think it's EIKAWA. So I'll have to double check that here right now.
While you're checking that, let me tell you my Ukiah story.
Okay.
2004, I get married. And right after I get married, I discover Star Wars Galaxies, which is an online gaming thing, kind of like World of Warcraft, but it's all Star Wars. And I played the demo, and I just had it generate a name for me. And the name it generated was Ukiah Ogak, but it was spelled different. Yeah, UCAIWHAA OGAC. So from that moment forward, in every game where I had to create a name, I was always Ukiah. So that's to hear you say, I was like, wait, what? What the hell did you just
say? So that's funny. But I just checked it, and Ukiah is EIKAIWA. So
okay.
Yeah, a little different, but pronunciation's close. And so basically in Japan, I don't think kids have really any real opportunity to really be kids, because you go from nursery school to an Ukiah sometimes. Like some of the kids I teach are 3 or 4 years old. And it's pretty wild. And then from there you go to elementary school, and there's tests to get into every school level: elementary, junior high, high school, college. Like there are tests to get into many schools, especially here in Tokyo.
Can you imagine if they did that shit here? That shit would never fly.
God. Never fly, man. Never fly. And it's like, that's just part of their lives. Like I have kids who are 9 years old going to regular school, my Ukiah, and cram school. So cram school is just literally, it is what it sounds like. They teach you everything they teach you in public school or private school, a lot of private schools here, but they just go more in depth and they jam a lot in there. I have kids who go to school for longer than I have work hours here.
That's crazy.
It's just nuts. It's crazy, man. And you know, it really resonates with the whole work-life balance here in Japan. There really is none. You work your whole life. You know, you belong more to your company than you do your family, and you're expected to behave that way here as a Japanese worker.
That's bizarre. I don't remember how many years ago it was, but was it Toyota or somewhere where the workers were collapsing?
It happens a lot here.
It's crazy.
You know, you'll find people just passed out in the trains or passed out, you know. Yeah, it happens a lot. And then death from overworking actually has its own phrase here. I can't recall it at the moment, but that's how often. And the government's had to get involved a lot to limit how many hours these companies are allowed to work. And still, even though it's illegal, it happens all the time.
Speaking of governments, what's the propaganda like over there? Because over here, to me, as an ignorant, uneducated American, all my assumptions from Japan come from cinema and YouTube. Like, is there any propaganda at all as far as like the American machine or the Japanese this, and we shall rise to power, and everybody else is full of shit?
Well, first off, I want to say, Jay, I've known you many years. I've called you many things. Ignorant, not one of them. So
I'm trying to speak. I'm speaking on behalf of my listeners.
Yeah. All right. Well, so regarding Japan's view of the U.S. is it's funny because I think socially and politically there's two very different viewpoints. Socially, America is very liked. It's very like, oh, wow, America. If you go to America, that's really cool. One of the goals for a lot of kids is to go to school in America, even for, you know, like an exchange student. If you do that, like your status, like you become like super cool and like, wow, that's amazing. And then politically, there's a lot of like, I don't want to say, it seems to be less biased, like less propaganda, more like, okay, this is what they're doing, like, especially with the corona and the election. Like, there seemed to be a lot of, we're glad there's 5,000 miles between us here. Like, we're close allies with Japan, the US, but I think there's a very like,
As you say that, I imagine my family, my relationship, right? So I represent Japan, and my wife and her siblings represent America and America's issues with itself. to where if my wife and her sister start arguing, I just kind of sit back and watch. I don't really get involved. I just kind of update everybody on what's going on.
Yeah, and that's very true. Kind of how it is. It's very open and honest, at least from what I've been able to dissect and observed. Again, culturally and socially, the viewpoints are different, but I think that's a very fair analogy.
So navigating over there, this is going to sound like an interview style question, and I fucking hate interview style questions, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Like, what's been unexpectedly the most difficult thing for you, at least early on during the transition?
During the transition,
other than the obvious communication.
Actually, communication isn't that difficult here in Tokyo, and I live in a fairly close to like the major tourist areas. Like,
so a lot of English speaking nationals.
So much not to the speaking, but I mean, you can get your gestures across, or most of the signs have English on them, or they're very readily like explainable. Or
middle finger is the middle finger. Got it.
Yeah. Kind of a thing, sort of.
Fuck you.
But when you have to, the thing that posed probably the greatest challenge to me when I first moved here, I'm a car guy. We're car guys. That's why we know each other, Jay.
100%.
Getting your license here is just completely 180 different from California. And I don't know Arizona. I know that's where you're based, but it is just such a eye-opening experience to see how the Japanese treat driving.
How so?
Versus, it is like in California when you take your test, everywhere in all the test booklets and even on the test, there's questions or statements that say things like driving is a privilege, not a right, and they really try to force that on you. But in California, they'll pretty much give you a license if you have a pulse. There's not much, that's going to stop you from getting one. Here, let's say you don't have your license as a Japanese national or as a foreigner, you have to go through a class, and the class is run by what would be like kind of the highway patrol equivalent. So it's not independent. There's the DMV and the police are one entity here. So you go through everything. And so the people who give you the tickets are the same one who are going to give you the license.
That's interesting.
So it's different. And then the test by itself, or the courses, are incredibly expensive here. The equivalent was about $3,000 to $3,500 to
Jesus.
qualify to take your test. That's not even including a test. And then taking your test, I don't know. Again, Arizona is probably very similar to California. When I took my test, I was out on public roads. I assume it's still done that way. It was a long time ago when we got our license.
There, they take you to freaking Suzuka.
Man, if they did, I would be all about it. I would fail on purpose just to go around again.
Again, right?
But it's a closed course. It's a built closed course to simulate the road, which is super interesting to me.
Don't they want people to, and this is coming from an American perspective, don't they want less people to drive? Because isn't it just so, it probably just depends on the city you're in. I'd imagine some are just like mass, people are on top of each other, and other ones might be one person every 300 yards. But don't they want to kind of discourage and would rather have people taking public transportation and clog up the roads?
Really, there's no reason in Tokyo to own a car. There's almost no reason to own a car.
Like New York City.
The public transportation here is so efficient and so affordable.
Yeah.
The only reason, right now, a lot of people are taking their cars into Tokyo because they want that space, that safety from Corona, that social distance. But so traffic has really increased in the past year, but there's really no reason to own a car. But in general, even the test is the same the test is kind of the same intensity no matter where you get it. Like my mother-in-law lives in Wakayama, which is very west side Japan of the main island, and out in the middle of the boonies, and it's still, she failed several times before casting.
How were you treated? How are you treated as an almond-eyed family member? A non-almond-eyed, non-almond-eyed.
To be fair, Jay, you've met me, and my eyes are fairly.
They actually are. That's why I was kind of conflicted on there. And I was like, wait a minute, you kind of look Asian.
Yeah. So when it came to meeting my family, so just for the listeners, I met my wife in the States. We dated for about 2 years, and then we had issues with her visa, and we decided that, I think we both knew we were going to get married, but under those constraints and under that kind of pressure, I think we both understood it was probably not a good idea. It was it would have been the right decision, but for the wrong reasons. And so we spent some time apart. She came back to Japan, and then we ended up getting that distance, that break, that pressure was relieved. And then I came, so that was 2017, she came back, and in April, and I went and visited her that year, or that Christmas. I stayed for a month. And we both kind of knew basically it was going to be a test ride. Like, could I move? Could I do this? So I really tried to avoid doing a ton of tourist stuff. So I wanted to see what daily life would be like. And I think I did that fairly well. But going back to your question, one of the things I did after asking my wife, or at the time my girlfriend, to marry me in that trip, was I met my what would be my future in-laws. And of course, there are many times and many ideas of what Asian cultures believe of Westerners, and myself, Japanese especially, I had my own ideas, like, they don't really want to mix. But my family is from Osaka, and Osaka people are generally more laid back. They're kind of like Californians in that way, very chill, very accepting. And my in-laws are super laid back and super chill. So as soon as I met them, they welcomed me in my house, into their home, and not quite hugging, because that's really not the thing here.
Mm-hmm.
But they were very welcoming and open. And so I felt super comfortable right away. I met them, and within half an hour, we were sitting in their super fancy tatami mat room, which is like the bamboo mats that you kind of picturesque think about in Japan. And I was drinking super fancy cherry blossom tea, which is really only used in very special occasions.
Nice.
And they were like, hey. And that was the moment where they kind of were like, are you going to get married? They kind of figured it out. And I had to ask. I had just met these people for a half an hour, and I was like, I had to ask for their permission to marry my wife, or my girlfriend.
By the way, I'm going to marry your daughter. What's up?
Basically. So it was a very high pressure.
They snatched the tea from you and shit. Give you water.
Yeah. Get out of here.
The fuck out.
Yeah. But no, they've been super loving and caring, and I think they were really happy. I joke about it, but I honestly believe my in-laws like me more than my own parents.
That's funny.
Which I got very lucky.
Because your parents are American, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
My parents are American. They're American. They had 4 kids. I'm number 3, and the one below me is the only girl. So I never had a real chance anyway. Right. But to be accepted that fast and that openly was very surprising for me.
It's good.
And I was very happy.
Yeah.
So that's one of the big motivators for me to kind of not stay here, but one of the happy things is, like, my mother-in-law calls me, we talk, my father-in-law, we're all friends and stuff. And in fact, in one instance, my mother-in-law was talking to everyone, and it was like, Jawn is a beam of light. That was I think she said almost literally verbatim, is a beam of light that's been brought into this family. And I was like, your daughter's not that much of a pain in the ass. But
Right.
but I appreciate the nice thought. I don't think my own parents have said anything that nice about me. I think the nicest thing they've ever said is, "Hey, you didn't fuck up so bad this time."
Come on. Come on.
Maybe I'm being a little maybe there's a little hyperbole there, but I definitely have the middle child syndrome. But they're really welcoming. My wife's grandparents are still really cool, which is great because they were both alive during World War II. So you figured they'd have some stigma.
Sure.
But no, everyone in my family loves me. In fact, my nieces and nephews, they all, Uncle John. Yeah. So it's a really good time as far as family goes.
You think maybe people's perspectives in different parts of the world, because being an American, we have to remember that cultures are different than us. People are raised different than us. Not everybody thinks the same way. And you're probably dealing with and not to paint everyone with a brush, the same stroke, but you're probably dealing with a better overall perspective because, as I've said before on my podcast, we're one of the younger, historic by duration, first world countries ever. Mm-hmm. And mm-hmm. Japan and China, they're some of the oldest by thousands of years.
Yeah. No, yeah, you're right.
So I bet you there's just a lot of perspective that we don't have. So what about socially, hanging out? Do you have any friends? I know that sounds like a funny question to ask, but I know you have some social groups, and is it hard? Was it hard to acclimate, or are you just kind of a loner, or what's the car scene like? I know I just threw like 6 questions at you. Let's start with: do you have any friends?
Well, Jay, I'd like to think of you as a friend, but here in Japan, but here in Japan, it's different, and I kind of arrived at a really good and really bad time. So I got here November of 2019, and
oh shit, yeah.
A few months later was Corona.
Yeah.
So my opportunities to meet people have really been limited. The friends I do have are really kind of from cars, actually, and people I kind of made friends with before I had even moved here. I'm friends with Katsuya Yamamoto-san. He's the owner of RFY. I'm sure you know.
Yeah.
So I'm good friends with him.
Must be nice.
When I go to Osaka, I go to his shop. In fact, when I visited that first time, he brought me to the shop, and he's like, threw me the keys to his car, and he's like, follow me. So we went to a track day. So he surprised me by taking me to a track day so I could drive his Beat and his NSX. So that was a really fun day. So every time he comes to the city, the Tokyo, we hang out. We did scuba not too long ago. So I have a lot of fun with him. He's definitely a good friend here. I'm friends with Mark Perez from Mita.
Oh, of course.
We work together, but we're also good friends. So I help him a lot. And he kind of gives me a lot of help in that realm. So it's I can't say I have too many friends as far as that goes. I've really tried to, I don't want to say this in like a really racist way. I've really tried to avoid making foreigner friends. And the reason I want to avoid making foreigner friends is I want to avoid using English or relying on English.
So by foreigner, you mean other people like you that came there from somewhere else?
Exactly. I want to make I want to make lots of Japanese friends because, well, I'm in Japan. It's part of the culture. It's a thing, and I want to speed up my learning and my understanding of this culture. One of the big reasons for me to move here was to understand the culture so I could better understand my wife, and the language is a big part of that. I've ended up making friends who, like Norway and people from Norway and Finland and UK, but it's not my goal. I'm not going out to the foreigner spots and trying to meet people who only speak English. In fact, I'm trying to do the exact opposite.
And I understand that. It's an interesting thing though, because 2006, I went to China for a couple of weeks, but when I was there, I started to understand why foreigners here all kind of hang out and huddle together, because it just feels more safe and more familiar. So it's interesting. Yeah. And I can understand why you would say that. But one thing that I learned on that trip, it's like there was myself, my cousin from Minnesota, and then he had friends already there, and they were all Americans that he's known for years. But there was a group of like 5 of us, plus one of the guys had married a Chinese lady, so she was like our official interpreter. And it's just, you started to understand why foreigners all cluster together.
Oh yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it definitely makes sense. It takes a special kind of person to move across the globe to a completely new culture, to a completely different language and place. I'm not going to say I'm special. I'm just going to say I was put into some extreme circumstances and had to make some choices.
Yeah.
But a lot of people who had done the same, it's like we're all here for kind of different reasons. But like you said, it's comfortable to be able to speak your native language, or a language that you know very well, especially with Japanese comparatively to English. It's so different and it's so challenging to learn.
Are there American neighborhoods? I know that sounds silly to ask, but we have like Little China and Little whatever and Little in whatever Koreatown. Are there segments like that over there? I would imagine there would be.
Yeah, it's funny because I just got back from my wife and I just got back from vacation. I know we're not supposed to really travel, but the state of emergency here was lifted.
Shame
so
on you.
Hey, the state of emergency was lifted, so we waited. We didn't go anywhere for the entire corona,
right?
And we were chill. But anyway, so we went to Okinawa, which it's a really super small island, really tropical.
I've seen Karate Kid too.
Has a lot of very San Diego vibes, in my opinion. But they had like an American Depot. Basically, they had A&W fast food chains. They had Levi's store. They had everything was very like America. And
isn't there a military base there or no? Oh yeah, there. See, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a military base there. It's very big. So everyone in Okinawa is pretty used to foreigners. So I saw tons of pale faces there. So it was very like, oh, okay, and in that zone, or I should say in that same trip, I kind of got the understanding why a lot of Japanese maybe don't like them, because that's their first. Military is usually your first experience of Americans as a Japanese. And like, I was in Okinawa and I saw 6 people crammed into a K car, which is a car that has a engine of 600 cc's or 660 or less. So it's a tiny car. So 6 big Americans jammed in this car, and you could tell they've all been drinking and they were just taken off, and they were definitely American military. So that's just something you don't do here. Drinking and driving is really like, you're not even allowed to have one beer and go drive home. Like that's how much serious they take it here. So, if I was Japanese and I saw that, I would have a very negative image of Americans. And I think the military friends that I do have from the States or in the States are like, yeah, we get in trouble a lot for doing stuff like that, shit like that. So it is what it is. But
no, I get it. I've seen some things that disgusted me before. And when I did that trip in 2006, I kind of looked around and I was like, no wonder people, and not to say people in Japan are like this, but just in general, there's that negative. So like you're saying, they love tourists because tourists bring money, but the person who lives there, even when we went to Italy, we were in Venice, like the Venice people who live there, you could tell the vacationers were like, they just hated us. Like, get out of my way.
Yeah.
But of course the shop owners, they love you. And, for Americans, a lot of times it's the wealthy and the self-righteous that do the bulk of the traveling, and everybody is beneath them. So you can kind of see by the way that so we're visiting people in their country, but we're treating them like shit because we're Americans. And so you can kind of see or we just don't respect their culture and stuff. So you can kind of see where some of that animosity comes from.
Exactly. And I think it just comes down to that. Like you said it really well, that respect. It's like, look, we're not in America. A lot of people represent or create that stereotype. So I feel like you need to really behave better. Like I go to parks and stuff with my dog. I adhere to the social, norms of owning a dog in Japan, which is very different. But like I've seen, I don't know if they were American, but I've seen white families letting their kids climb trees and go into places obviously that were roped off.
That sounds American to me.
It's very like, come on, guys. Like,
what are we doing?
Don't do that. It's like, I start to get embarrassed, and that's saying a lot, Jay. You know me. I'm not one that easily embarrasses. So
you have a slight, you have a slight tan to your skin, your hair is kind of wild and like Japanese anime-ish, and you could easily not be American.
Yeah, I guess that's one of the beauties of being a half-breed. I'm half Mexican, half American, European, and so it plays well sometimes. But to kind of answer more questions, I'll get to the car parts because that's probably the one thing that I'm so excited. You asked me, what's the car scene like out here? It is absolutely insane here. Like, absolutely amazing. Like I talked a bit about getting your license. So if getting your license is, I would say 10 times harder here than it is in the States, owning a car is 15, 20 times harder in the city.
It's very expensive, right?
It is so expensive. And the taxes you pay, the parking fees. I mean, the parking fee alone that I would have to pay right now is equivalent to $300 a month. So just to park, and the parking is registered. So like you get like a registration just like you would for a car and you have to have that in order to even buy a car here in Tokyo. Other prefectures, other cities, that have more space, it's not the same.
Is there street parking here? Are there meters? No, right?
There are lots of meters.
Oh, there
lots
are.
of meters.
Okay.
Yeah. But you can't like register a car. You can't buy a car and register it to a metered spot. That doesn't fly. So I have so much more respect for the people here who own cars and the car guys here, because there is no in-betweens. Like in the States, like you and I, we've seen cars that people just like buy and mod. They slam them to the ground. They put on rep wheels and, they go to shows. We've seen it. They get by with as cheap as they can. Here, minivans rock TE37s. Like nobody rocks rep. Nobody rocks rep anything here, dude. Doesn't matter what it is. I saw a K truck the other day with Watanabes on it. The wheels cost more than the car, more than the truck. It was hilarious. So it just goes to the extremes here. People love their cars here. Like I know a few NSX owners, and most of the time their engines are fairly stock.
Rick, which is so different from. Is that just a myth? Like you can't have a turbo or supercharger because you're limited over there?
Oh no, you totally can.
Oh.
The equivalent of like a smog check or an emissions check here is called the Shaken, and it's probably on its face worse than California for stuff like that, but there's plenty of ways around it. It's not nearly as, now that I've done a lot more research and stuff on it, it's not nearly as intimidating now, but they don't really monitor so much the emission or the modifications. It's really mostly just about emissions and is your car safe? Those types of things are what they really care about. So you're allowed to have a lot of modifications. And in fact, a ton of cars do. If you ever come to Japan, Jay, you and I will go to the super famous parking lot. It's Daikoku Fotu, and any car guy who's kind of heard of Japan kind of knows that area or has seen it on pictures and stuff. It's this giant parking lot, and any decent day, there's usually cars, but especially on weekends, it is jam-packed. And it's not just Japanese cars. That's what makes Japan car culture so cool. You have everything from Lambos, McLarens, Ferraris to Hondas, Toyota, and then down to Volkswagen Beetles.
How about a 67 Camaro?
People have them.
I bet.
People love them.
That's what I've heard.
Car
I've heard
culture
people
here,
love the American cars in other countries.
people here love the American cars. There, I live in Setagaya, which is kind of a nicer area, and there's a lot of old money here. But I've seen a giant '69 pink Cadillac, and trying to drive anything bigger than a Honda Civic here, trying to drive a Honda Civic here is challenging. I cannot imagine trying to drive, the land boats that of those '60s or '70s American, but people do. Right now, one of the big things that is really popular are like lowriders, like the Hispanic style, Mexican style lowriders,
like the
hydraulics,
6'4" Impala.
6'4" Impala. I'll send you pictures when we're finished here. It's just, and they are exact, like down to the Daytons.
What's the funniest 100%. Thing you've seen in the car scene, or you see somebody looking like, trying to look like Snoop Dogg? Like, what's the funniest thing you've seen?
Oh, funny. Funny is an interesting one. I would say probably the funniest thing I've seen really was actually, and I know it's probably not what you're thinking, but someone decided to purchase and buy a full-on California Highway Patrol car.
Okay.
And it had the badge, it had the lights, it had the bumper, it had everything. He even had the California exempt license plates. So I don't know how he got that. I have no idea how he got that here because, I'm just like, oh my God, how did you do that? But as far as like random cars, I mean, yeah, there's just been some really wild ones. I mean, everything's just so cool here. Like I feel like you could spot like a Lancia Delta, no problem. Like
nice.
People love those cars here. Yeah, it's just
people love those cars here too, but we don't ever see them.
But you can't get them.
Right.
You can't get them, and here it's like, you can have anything. Doesn't matter. Left-hand drive, right-hand drive. It doesn't matter. As long as you pay the taxes, kind of Japan's like, whatever, do you. So it's pretty cool. But what gets me, I think the weirdest car I saw was the Tommy Kaira ZZ. And it was the track version. So it only had one tiny aluminum seat. And right next to it was the fuel cell. And it had a cage. I'll send you pictures of that as well. It was wild. And it was just like, good God, this thing is a death trap. It's based off a MR2 Spider, or I don't think that one is. I don't remember. But either way, it was just like the tiniest little death trap on wheels. And it looked like so much fun.
So based on your observation, is Japan in front of or behind what you see here? Or are they setting it? And what's something that everybody over there in the car scene is into that you kind of maybe scratch your head at?
Okay, so,
because like for a while they were into those really long, like Harley Davidson style exhaust pipes on their cars. And that never really caught on here.
Yeah. So they still have those. There's a car group kind of for everyone here. But in general, I think the thing that gets me, that really strikes me, is like, no matter what you're into here in Japan, you're into it 100%. There is no halfway.
Right.
You don't show up with your body kit not painted, that kind of thing. Like people go through a lot of trouble to make their cars, this thing. And a lot of them will build things themselves. So it's a true passion here. It really shows. Like, nobody just buys stuff off eBay and slap it on and call it a build. And that's what I really appreciate coming from the States. And
you tell them you're friends with the owner of the Macross Unisex?
I have not told them yet. I don't tell many people that because then, Jay, I have your phone number. I might be tempted to give it out. I don't know, man.
I would take a call or a phone interview from somebody over there.
Yeah, I mean, your car doesn't have the wrap anymore, but when it did, I could probably introduce you to a few people that would be interested. But I mean, that's the other thing, is like, NSX owners are totally different here. It's so different. Like, it's such a different mindset. For example, Honda people in general, or I should say racing. I've been in racing since I was 19 years old, and I've built cars and pit crewed and all this other stuff. But, in America, you need nice power. You got it. And it's just about spending a lot of money usually and having the best rig underneath you. When I did the track day, I was very surprised to see that almost I didn't see a single EG Civic or EK Civic or EF with anything other than a B series. So if it came with a B16, the best I saw was it had a B18 in it. So, and nothing was really swapped. Not really. Swaps aren't really that common here, which I thought was really interesting. And I'd asked Yamamoto-san, I said, hey, what's the deal? And he's like, people do it. And, especially in Osaka, which is really big Honda country, but people do it. But here, if you go racing and you have like a K-swapped EG or something, which is going to be crazy fast, he said, no one's going to respect you. Because it's not you driving the car fast. It's the car being fast. So the mentality is so different.
I can appreciate that. It's more purist in a purity, because purist denotes elitism, and it doesn't sound like it's elitism, but purity denotes the way it's supposed to be, right?
Exactly. And it's like you can do a B16 or B18. People like to keep it kind of, I guess we would call it period correct.
Mm-hmm.
And get as much out of the platform that came in the car versus, just easy swap into whatever. And the NSX is very much the same. Like most Japanese people believe that the NSX doesn't need any more real power, so they'll do exhaust, headers, and maybe a tune.
What does Mr. RFY think?
Mr. RFY has to sell parts, but he would love to. When I've talked to him and we talk about my build and what's going on, and he's like, dude, can I please drive your car when it's done? And it's like, yeah, of course, whatever. Because no one in Japan wants to go to the extremes. Like I'm doing a 3.6 stroker motor, super high compression with ITBs. I just bought my Toda ITBs. So he's like, dude, can you please let me drive it? And I want to, because a lot of, especially the NSX, it's revered here.
Dude,
it never really had the, what's up?
Why don't you come back to the States on the trip and bring him with you? I will fucking drive over to California.
It's funny. I think he would do it again. He had a lot of fun at Expo, and that's actually how I met him, San Francisco NS Expo. And we hung out every day.
He was with that group. He was with the group.
Yeah, he was with Regan and a bunch of people. And it's funny because at that day on the track event at that expo, he's walking around. He's like, hey man, Yamamoto-san, he's a cool dude. We'd hang out, we'd drink at night, and I was like, you want to drive my car? And he's like, oh, I can't. Which I've learned in Japanese culture now is very standard. Like they say no, but if you want them to do something, you have to kind of keep pushing. You're like, they'll like, no. And you're like, come on. And then usually about the second or third time, they'll if they actually want to do it, it's just like polite. You can't just instantly say yes. So it's very funny. So I feel I kind of regret not knowing that before, because, I would feel really, I feel like I owe him for him letting me drive his NSX, here in Japan, versus I would have really appreciated him driving mine in the States when he was there. But yeah, if I can get him over, I would love to, because, I'm friends with the NASA AZ guys, Jim and all those guys. We might even make it out to an AZ track for you, Jay. Easy peasy. Because
shit, if I don't have to go anywhere, that's even better.
I know if you still have your NSX by the time we get over there, he would really love to experience a turbo NSX. That's something, that just doesn't happen here. I know he was in Regan's supercharged car, and all that jazz. It's just different, It's just a totally different mentality when it comes to building them here.
Oh, and I would have totally thrown him the keys had I known. I'll fucking let anybody drive my car.
I'm gonna take you up on that. Me and my dog will come out. We'll come back and we'll fly in the VF1, dude. My brother's such a big fan of your build, so he was such a big fan. He didn't come out. He didn't check it out when I was ready to show it to him. That big of a fan. Yeah, at Vegas. Yeah. Well, it's hard. Don't judge my brother when it comes to Vegas. He's got an issue.
All right,
he's got many issues. Vegas is one of them.
I'm gonna get you out of here on this. What's the number one thing you miss the most about the States?
Driving, 100%. Absolutely. It's like every road here, like I rent cars and I've done the fun JDM Legend car rental thing. But and then just being able to get in your car and go and not worrying about much. Like toll roads really aren't a thing in the States. Not really, at least in California and, in Arizona. But every road here is a toll road. Almost every highway you pay a ton of money. I pay more when I rent a car and I go to Osaka. I pay more in tolls than I do for the rental.
Wow. So what do you do? You have to stay you can't just jump on the highway usually and just go for a cruise. You have to just kind of stay within off the highway, which can be boring or repetitive at times.
Yeah, I mean, it's just traffic and you're dealing with the lights and stuff here. And I mean, it just takes longer. It takes a lot longer. And, granted, the speed limit here is ridiculously slow. On the highway, it's 60 kilometers, which is a little over 40.
Yeah.
So, I mean, rarely does anyone ever really drive that, but, you take your risks going over, 60 kilometers an hour. You take your risk going over 60 kilometers an hour. But I miss my car. I miss being able just to go drive stress free. That used to be what I did. Or working on my car, even like that. Those two things for me for sure are big. And I rented a house in California. Or I should say I rented part of a house in California, and having that space is nice, like barbecue and kind of do whatever you want. That's another thing I kind of miss, is just like having that freedom to kind of not worry about so much about like, oh man, maybe my neighbors don't want to smell smoke. And that's something you kind of have to consider a lot about. It's just everything here is about considering other people, which was probably one of the reasons why it makes it so nice to live here.
Right.
But if I had to tell you, we're car people, Jay. We're car people, and I miss my car. I miss being able to drive. I miss track days. I miss working and wrenching. Like that was my everything. And so having moved here and not having that, especially with Corona, not really being able to go out and do other things, it's been a very, very challenging time for me, and I feel very sorry for my wife, because she's had to see me pull my very crazy anime hair out, as you call it.
But it's cool anime hair.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. Now it's like crazy long and super anime right now. I went Super Saiyan on you, Jay.
Well, you have to send me a picture.
I will, man. You'll be like you're ready to donate to Locks of Love, man.
And then I also have to get with you offline about maybe getting some Nissan stuff, because I just picked up another Infiniti, so I have to sell my first one.
Yeah.
And there's no real aftermarket for the car that I have here in the States. It's fucking alarming. And I found an exhaust that cost $6,000. I'm like, that's more than anything outside of a turbo that I bought from the NSX. Are you fucking kidding me right now?
Yeah. And exactly. And that's what's funny is here is like, you'll find Mugen body kits for Odysseys and CRVs, and it doesn't matter. People mod them. And they'd love it, especially now the family cars, because, car guys like us, we grow up, we have kids. Well, some of us grow up, we have kids, we get married, and that doesn't stop us from being car guys.
Well, yeah, let's see what we can find for my Infiniti. I have an Infiniti FX50S, which over there is the same thing as an S51, Sam 51. And all the stuff I find for it's either I don't know if it's out of China or Taiwan, or a lot of it's out of Russia, which is super fucking interesting to me. But there's got to be something over there somewhere, because there isn't fucko in the United States for aftermarket. It's alarming to me.
I mean, Jay, you've been living it, and I mean, even when I was there, just in general, the car culture is just getting so choked out. It's not profitable. I mean, it hasn't been profitable for years, but it's like, there's so little reason for manufacturers to get into anything new these days. So it doesn't surprise me at all that there's so little available. Emissions, you got the electric cars, the regulations coming through. You have all that stuff that's just right down the pipeline, especially if you're in California. And, for car guys like us, it's a real It's potentially a very dark time. Not that I don't like the environment or, I want to see these things go. It's just, I feel like we as Americans have lost our ability to choose, or our freedom to choose. And that's probably our greatest freedom. And that's where I think I have the biggest problems currently.
All right, John, I want to thank you for joining the Hard Parking Podcast. As always, we'll stay in touch. And hey, I'm serious, man. We gotta figure something out on my new Infinity, because I'm drowning over here.
Hey, man, doesn't matter. Even if someone doesn't make what you want, you know me, I'll make it. I'll make it happen. I know enough people over there. We can make whatever you want in better ways. Bigger, better, better, buddy. But thanks for having me on. It's that's right. That is right. But I appreciate being on the show, man. Thanks so much. I really I thought it was fun. And hopefully your listeners thought it was interesting at least.
Well, it doesn't matter because I did. All right, buddy.
All right, bud. I'll talk to you again soon.
It's time for the Q&A segment. This is the segment where I answer the questions that you ask me on social media, because I've asked you to submit questions to me. The show is not quite to the point where people are just submitting questions via email, hardparkingpodcast@gmail.com. But I do sometimes get questions via text messages that I turn into this segment. So we'll get started. Rebecca asked, how do you dodge a coworker when you see the message dots? Probably works for iPhone too. So what she's talking about, for those of you with jobs and not careers, you probably have no idea what we're talking about. For those of you in careers, well, here's the thing. So the message dots is basically interoffice communication. So if you use Skype, Microsoft Teams, whatever else, you typically don't get those when you're working at McDonald's. But you could have a job at a call center that you don't consider a career, and you may have some interoffice communication with somebody else. That's what she's talking about. So the dots is, someone's getting ready to type to you. And that's the thing. As soon as you click on their name, it's a little eyeball appears, which means you've seen their message. And it's the same thing with an iPhone. It says read, even though if they look at their watch and they get part of the message, doesn't mean they really read the message, but you know that you've at least got their attention. So how do you dodge a coworker when you see the message dots? You don't click on the message. You just do not click on the message until you're ready to read whatever it is they sent. And I'm guilty of this. I do it all the time. I do it on text messages, and I do it on interoffice instant messaging. So that's what you do. You just don't click on it. Mark Stolman asks, wireless CarPlay, ? Why not standard, and where do I get it? Well, Mark, in some 2020 models and some more 2021 models, I would imagine more models moving forward for new vehicles, they actually have wireless CarPlay. Most manufacturers already have CarPlay. Wireless CarPlay is kind of a new concept. I love it. But a lot of times you can buy an add-on module aftermarket to go into your factory radio or aftermarket radio for a couple $100 or less, sometimes more. I just bought a $600 unit, as I mentioned in the last show, a Grom unit. And once my new wire harness arrives, I plug the factory wires into the aftermarket, and then the aftermarket into the factory radio. And I'm going to have Android Auto, CarPlay, and wireless CarPlay. No CarPlay, no J. I'm going to have it in the new car. Pretty cool technology. I'm excited about it. But buy it from a trusted source. There's a lot of secondhand companies out there. So you kind of get what you pay for. So just be careful. But it looks like it's starting to pop up everywhere. And if you search for wireless CarPlay, make sure the module actually has wireless CarPlay and it's just not written in the SEO and it doesn't actually give you what you want. So Sharinsuge, I am going to murder some of your names and I apologize. This person asked me, how much money have I spent total on building my NSX? That's a tough one. I've had the car since October 2012. I've rebuilt the car visually several times. And if you have to include things like oil changes and general maintenance, which you probably don't, but I'm going to, I spent a lot of money on the car. I've probably thrown over $40,000 in the car in the last 8 years, almost 9 years, actually. And that could be anything from scheduled repair, if you get the timing belt and water pump done, that's a lot of money. That's a major service interval though. You get new wheels, you get brakes, some of that stuff is maintenance, some of that stuff is cosmetic, and it adds up. So Ronald, go get RJ is his name on Instagram. Go get all ran together. Go get your J. Can I shoot your car next month? Well, let me tell you something, Ron. I'm going to say yes, but you're going to have to hit me up and the car's going to have to be available. And as much as I feel like all photographers deserve to be paid for their time, I'm not going to pay you for it. So if you want to take photos of the car for your portfolio and you can slide me some photos, but you don't have to, I'm fine with that. And here's why I say that. Because the camera equipment costs money and your time is worth something. But I'm not asking for your time, you're asking for mine. So that's usually how I operate. Sounds like a dick move, but it's really not. Because if I need photos of my car, I currently don't need any, but if I need photos, I know people, I'm going to reach out to people to take photos. And I'm not saying you're not one of those people, but just hit me up. Sayazareyev. Man, I got a couple good questions. Well, these aren't even good questions, but I have a couple questions from people that I'm not familiar with their names, so I'm going to go ahead and answer your question. Some of these questions I would crumple up and throw across the room. But Syazariarif asked me, what's the next project for your NSX? I don't know. Sell it? I don't really have anything listed. Anything at this point moving forward, as I've said a few times before on past episodes, which obviously you haven't listened to, so maybe you're new to the podcast, or you just don't pay attention, or you don't plan on listening to this anyway. But I'm at the point with the car where it's time to start replacing some of the seals and some of the stuff that has nothing to do with the show car. It's just general maintenance. So either I start doing that or I sell the car. And that's it. Move on to the next project or just keep this car forever. I don't care that the cars are worth more and more. I don't care. I just want to experience a different car or different cars at some point in my life. And part of the journey is letting go and moving on. Or not. Parentids SS_SW asked me, how much horsepower do you have in your NSX? Well, let me tell you something. It's boosted and I have flex fuel in there. So, and again, I've answered this question a few times. So on 91 octane, I'm at 415 wheel. And if I'm at E85, I'm somewhere around 460 wheel horsepower. Go ahead and add the 15 to 20% that they say you have to factor in for horsepower with the crank. And there's your answer. I'm not going to do the math for you because I suck at math and I don't feel like doing the math for you. Sebastian asks, Godzilla versus King Kong, who wins? Sebastian, have you watched the movie Godzilla versus Kong? This isn't the first time either. They've had several in the past. And I really love, like when I was a kid, I used to watch Godzilla after church. You have Godzilla and King Kong fighting, or Godzilla would fight somebody else. And you could tell that there was an actual person in a costume because they would do legit wrestling moves on each other, which is hilarious. I have my preference. I would say watch the movie because they both do some really cool things in the movie. First of all, the movie's overrated. It's like 96 on Rotten Tomatoes by the people. It's bullshit. There are definitely some stupid shit things in that movie. I like the movie because I love Godzilla and I don't mind King Kong. And that is your Q&A segment. I want to thank Jawn and Naya for joining us all the way from Japan. How did we record that interview? You didn't ask, but I'm going to tell you because this is the first time I've done one like this. We were talking through Facebook. That was a Facebook audio phone call. So I think it sounded pretty good. But Jawn, he and I, we met. We've known each other through the car community, but we met in Vegas a few years ago. And we've kept in contact ever since. Super good, fun guy. And it's always fun to kind of find those differences in countries. Because you get a lot of people in America who were like, America sucks. I want to go live somewhere else. Or other people in other countries are like, our country sucks. We're going to go live in America. And it's all about the grass being greener on the other side. I mean, there's pros and cons to everything you do. And one thing I wanted to ask, but I forgot is, what was it? What moment did you miss living in California? Did you miss the States the most? And he did say that he really missed being able to drive around. But I mean, I don't know. If I were to go somewhere, I would be super stoked. But after a while, something would happen and I would be really sad and I would miss home. So I'm wondering what that moment really is for Jawn. And maybe we can talk to him again in the future. Want to thank my sponsor, Right Honda out of Scottsdale, Arizona. Higher quality detail, booster bath, 4-wheel online, tongue treats, and rides sold. Also, Patreon business supporter, Kuya Automotive out of Winter Garden, Florida. If you want to get a hold of me, you want to follow me on social media, I'm easy to find. I'm not hard to find. You can reach me on Instagram, which I'm very active on, at NA2NSX or JTravels, JHAE_travels. The Facebook page, Hard Parking Media. Join the Facebook group called Hard Parking Violations. Just submit your request. I'll let you in. If you're already a friend of mine, you're going to get right in. Follow me on Twitter at JFinning. We have a Teespring store if you want to get some swag. Hard Parking Podcast store. If you like what you heard, please leave a review if you're listening on a platform that allows reviews. Tell a friend. Do something. Give me a 5-star rating. Don't give me a 1-star rating. I will find you. I have an exceptional set of skills. I will find you, and I will hurt you. If you're in a position to help the podcast upgrade, join the Patreon for as little as $3 a month and get access to bonus audio as well as show swag. You can also just tell a friend to help the podcast grow because I can't do this without your word of mouth advertising. So let's do this. Let's grow this thing together. As a lot of you guys know, my daily driver is a 2007 Infiniti FX35 Sport. It's about time I put some money into it. Can't just drive the NSX around all the time looking nice. Want to get some wheels. For over a decade, 4-Wheel Online has been bringing the best truck accessories and truck parts to enhance the appearance and performance of all trucks and SUVs. They're dedicated to providing an extensive range of upgrades that will match any maker model on the road. Their truck products cover everything you need for a custom look and added functionality. I was talking about a wheel and tire package. Head over and use their configuration tool. They carry all the major brands of wheels and tires, so go get outfitted today. Visit them at 4Wheel Online. That's 4Wheel, singular, online. Are you tired of blowing out your back at the bathtub while washing your dog or subjecting your canine to a water torture bath while leashed up to a post outside? Now there's a far more effective way to wash your pet while saving your back and keeping your dog happy. It's called Booster Bath, a portable bathtub on legs. Head over to boosterbath.com, one word, and pick one up. Available in 3 sizes, this tub system features a drain, a soap cubby, and water-controlling wand. This tub conveniently breaks down to be stored when not in use. Want to save 10% on your first-time purchase? Head over and sign up today to make that happen. Boosterbath.com.
Shut up!